Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. The Trump administration has announced sanctions against Russian oil companies as a result of quote-unquote lack of serious commitment to a peace progress to end the war in Ukraine. The sanctions were announced by US President Donald Trump as his frustration with Russia mounts for not stopping the war in Ukraine, something Trump is adamant on achieving. Trump shared a post on Truth Social where he posted a statement by the US Department of the Treasury with the title "Treasury Sanctions, Major Russian Oil Companies Call on Moscow to Immediately Agree to Ceasefire." Earlier, in a bid to get Russia to stop the war in Ukraine, which is just months away from entering its fourth year, EU nations approved a 19th package of sanctions against Moscow. These sanctions included a ban on Russian natural gas imports. Joining us to discuss this further is Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat. Dr. Sharat Kohli, senior economist, joins us live. Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations, is live with us from Minneapolis. Ruben Johnson, Director, Asia Research Center, Casimir Pulaski Foundation, is also joining us from Warsaw in Poland. Let me make a start with you first. Ambassador Dayal, what do you believe the impact of these fresh sanctions are going to be?
Well, Uday, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. I would like to put the matter in perspective by highlighting two things. Firstly, why have these sanctions been imposed? And secondly, what will be the impact on India? Because that is my major concern. Now, the US imposed major sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, after President Donald Trump cancelled the summit with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, the sanctions are a direct response to what the US called Moscow's lack of serious commitment to peace in Ukraine. Now, the sanctions blacklist Russian oil giants Rosneft and Lukoil, along with dozens of their subsidiaries. Now, Rosneft is state-controlled, while Lukoil is a privately owned firm. Now, all assets belonging to the sanctioned firms, including in the US, will be frozen. Now, US citizens and entities are prohibited from conducting business with them. Now, in India, the sanctions are expected to hit several refiners directly who are tied to Russian supply. India's state-run refiners like Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, Hindustan Petroleum, Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, as well as various private giants such as Reliance Industries and the HPCL Mittal Energy Limited. These are among the most exposed companies. Now, sanctions mean that buyers will need to find new ways to move and pay for those shipments, which bring about extra costs and complications. And that's exactly what the US wants. It wants to cut Moscow's profits. Now, let me mention that Rosneft also owns nearly 50% of Nayara Energy Limited, which works from the Vardhanir refinery in Gujarat. And it may struggle with selling refined products rather than just obtaining crude. So the Trump administration's move to sanction the Russian oil firms will make it almost impossible for India to continue procuring crude from Russia. And while India avoids US sanctioned oil from Iran and Venezuela, Russian oil had remained both permissible and cost-effective, leading to increased purchases. So there'll be a significant decline in Russian oil imports. And to fill the supply gap, India will need to find alternative sources, in all likelihood from the Middle East. This would make a reversal because India had dramatically increased its purchases of discounted Russian oil. And the shift away from this discounted oil will likely increase costs for Indian refiners, potentially squeezing refining margins and raising the costs of domestic fuel prices. So in the past few years, India had saved billions of dollars by purchasing Russian crude, but this will have to stop, and that this might in fact pressurize India to accept the trade deal with the United States, which has been wanting India to cut off oil purchases from Russia.
Right. Dr. Sharat Kohli, let me draw you in here. What do you believe are going to be the ramifications immediately and long term of these sanctions, these fresh sanctions that the US president has imposed today in an attempt by him once again to put economic pressure for stopping the war?
Good evening, Uday, to you, my fellow panelists and NewsX viewers. Well, I really don't think there's going to be any immediate impact. The impact is going to be midterm to long term because the $2.5 is the discount we are getting from Russia. Now, there are two aspects of imports from Russia, Uday, as of today. One is, of course, the $2.5 discount we are getting. This discount used to be, once upon a time, it used to be very deep, about $23 at its peak. And now gradually it's come down to $2.5. So that discount is going to disappear because there'll be some logistic restrictions. Like one of the examples could be some shipping lines would be sanctioned, so they will have to probably take a longer route. The freight will go up. Companies are Reliance, Nayara, and as Ambassador Dayal rightly said, HPCL, Indian Oil, all the refiners, who import from about 1/3 of our oil imports are right now being sourced from Russia for that matter. So it will have a mid to long term. And the second aspect of sanctions is that, or second aspect why India will not immediately stop buying from Russia is because I think this is an indirect attack on India's sovereignty. Well, President Trump knows very well. He's been harping this number of times. Russia, oil, and India. They seem to have become synonymous terms. Every time he names Russia oil, he names India. Little does he know, or I'm sure he knows everything about it, that the energy imports into Europe and NATO are far more than India, and Turkey and China and so on and so forth. So I think India would like to give a message that our sovereignty, even if it's attacked indirectly, is not acceptable. So I have a feeling that the Indian government is going to take a very prudent and pragmatic approach, even if it costs us the same as it costs importing from Middle East. I think India might still continue because this is a bullying tactic. It's an indirect bullying tactic. So it's a matter of our sovereignty besides the cost. Of course, it has to make economic sense. If it becomes too expensive for us vis-a-vis, Middle East or vis-a-vis America for that matter, then obviously it will have an impact. But I just fail to understand President Trump's approach here. First of all, the ever-changing stance. There is a different stance today. There's a different stance tomorrow, afternoon, evening. We find highly unpredictable statements, conflicting statements, and sometimes self-created, concocted statements coming that India said we are going to reduce Russian oil, when Indian Foreign Ministry says we did not make any such commitment. So I think there's a cooking up happening at the diplomatic level to put words in somebody's mouth that you end up saying this, which I just fail to understand because I have two learned and experienced diplomats sitting with me. I do not know if they will concur with me, but I've never seen diplomacy of this kind where you create a statement on behalf of somebody, assuming that somebody is going to ratify it after you've created, which seems very, very strange to me. As the economic part of it, Uday, I'm very clear. This will not have a short-term impact. In midterm, we are importing oil from Russia. We are paying, as you're aware, it's in ruble and rupee. So the currency is not impacted. Some indirect impact would be there. There'll be no direct impact. The impact will be very, very indirect. And because it is indirect, it will have a midterm to long-term ramifications. We will start realizing it probably between 3 to 6 months. As the supply gets a little more expensive for us, it's going to probably, the crude oil price right now is about $65. Add to that the advantage of discount, which we might lose because of these sanctions over a period of time. But by then, a very important thing which I would like to add here, Uday, before you go to my next honorable panelist, is that there is a lot of gap between now and 3 months. President Trump changes overnight. Every morning you have a new tweet. Every morning you have a new Truth Social statement being given. I think, as they say in English, there's a lot of water which might flow under the bridge until then. Okay. So we need to wait and see instead of jumping to conclusions.
Let me quickly draw in Reuben Johnson as well. Reuben, now as far as your opinion on these sanctions is concerned, is it reaping dividends? Is it working to put economic pressure on Russia? These fresh set of sanctions announced today, do you welcome them? What do you believe the impact will be?
I can't pick up a single news story or read a single news story today that doesn't talk about Moscow now having problems because it's no longer making barrels full of money from selling barrels full of oil. The oil is either sanctioned or the shadow fleet tanker ships are being detained and confiscated, or it's the Ukrainians hitting Russian oil refining and oil production facilities so that they're able to pump and process less. So yes, anything that cuts back on Russia's oil revenue is very effective, and we're seeing it. We're seeing petrol shortages spreading all over Russia. We're seeing queues at petrol stations, and this has follow-on effects throughout the Russian economy. So, yeah, uh, it's really not an exaggeration to say that anyone who continues to buy Russian oil is funding the murder of women and children in these Ukrainian cities, because that's where the money goes after the Russians receive it. It's to fund this war machine.
Right. What do we expect then next, Ruben? Do you expect more such sanctions? Because obviously Donald Trump is growing increasingly frustrated that the war is not stopping. He's obviously attempting to get the Nobel Peace Prize. He is wanting this war to stop as soon as possible, but that's not happening as of now. There still isn't no clarity on when Trump and Putin will meet again, if they will, and when that'll be. All of this, of course, even as this war nears its 4-year anniversary.
That's a canard. You can't win the Nobel Peace Prize unless it's next year. It's already been given to somebody else. Okay? And stop blaming this on Donald Trump. The problem is Vladimir Putin. A lot of people, a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources were put into a summit which was supposed to take place in Alaska. Both sides flew in. They sat down for initial discussions, and the whole thing was canceled before it was half over. And the reason it was canceled, because Putin did the same thing he always does. He comes out with these maximalist demands. Oh, all of Ukraine belongs to me. Ukraine should unilaterally disarm. They should surrender. I should be allowed to put my own person in charge of the country. His demands never change. And then he starts talking about this fantastic, completely fabricated version of history, talking about 17th century princes and warlords and Cossack kings who were at one time fighting in the same army. So that proves, X hundred years ago, that proves that Ukraine and Russia are one nation. Well, he started that again in Alaska. Trump got very annoyed, almost walked out of the meeting, and he said, you know what? I don't want to go through another one of these. It's just Putin wasting people's time and trying to create more space for him to build more weapons and go out and press gang more people into his military so they can be sent
Okay.
to the front to die.
Okay.
That's all it is. Okay, this is not a real peace problem.
Economic sanctions are working, says Ruben. Sharad Kohli, what's your opinion? Economic sanctions are working, says Ruben. What's your opinion? Also, Donald Trump doesn't want to waste time with Vladimir Putin, which is why he's not holding another summit. Also, says Ruben from Poland. Sharad Kohli, your counter.
Well, I'm afraid I'll completely differ from my previous learned panelist. I mean, to call us as funding the murder of people in Ukraine, I strongly object to that as well. I really don't think, as an Indian, I would like to accept that completely. We are sovereign state. We have to deal with whosoever we want to do. And my learned panelist may be a supporter of President Trump, but it doesn't mean that you accuse India of funding murder of children and women or whatever in Ukraine. I completely disagree and object to that statement. I don't think that is acceptable at any platform. That kind of accusation is definitely not acceptable. I think the administration in America must be worried about fall in approval rating of Trump administration. They have to be concerned because his approval rating has fallen down because of his economic policies. America is on the brink of a recession right now. Inflation is climbing, investments are disappearing, small businesses are closing down. Somebody has to advise that, economically speaking, your policies have to align with the rest of the world. You're part of one big family now, as far as the world is concerned. You cannot run a government by bullying other governments. That's what I want to say. And I again
Ambassador,
express my strong objection to India being accused of funding murder of children in Ukraine.
absolutely, absolutely. At the end of the day, of course, India is doing what it is because of strategic interests, and India has no role in this war. Of course, we have been calling for peace on numerous occasions. But Ambassador Dayal, what's your take? Are the sanctions working? Are they yielding results? Are they managing to exert any sort of pressure, or not at all? What's your opinion? And what's your counter to the statement made by Ruben just a short while back?
Well, the sanctions are definitely going to work. They have just been imposed, so they might take a little time to set in motion the entire gamut of policies that they tend to target. So there is no doubt that blacklisting and sanctioning these two Russian companies is going to impact their activities in a very big way. So the sanctions will definitely work. Now, as regards the other issue of how the US has accused India of bankrolling Russia and thus promoting the murder of innocent people, well, as Mr. Sharad Kohli said, that is totally misplaced, because a whole lot of other countries in Europe also were purchasing Russian oil and gas, and nothing has been said about them. So India has followed a policy of strategic independence, and we maintained good relations with Ukraine as well as with Russia, while counseling them to settle this matter and end the war. And our relations are very good.
Are we expecting any sort of sanctions, Ruben Johnson, on China as well? Any secondary tariffs on them?
Am I expecting secondary tariffs on China? Yes.
When though? Because it's been quite a while.
If my colleague says that other countries are buying Russian oil and gas and no one is saying anything bad about them, he hasn't been reading the news. I read this every day here in Poland about European countries that continue to buy Russian energy, and people are screaming about it. And they're saying far more harsh things than what I've said about the purchases of India by India of Russian oil a few moments ago. So this is again.
No, but when do we expect these sanctions on China, or is that just hypocrisy that there will be talk on China and on their purchase of oil, but there won't be any sanctions or tariffs because you don't want to upset the international market?
There will be sanctions on China. There's already plenty of tariffs on China already. You're talking like we've done nothing to China. That's simply not true.
No, I'm talking about secondary sanctions because of their purchase of Russian oil. It's been a while since the war's been on. Why no decision on those?
Eventually, yes, it will be.
Okay, eventually it'll happen, but it hasn't happened till now. That's a double speak, Ruben. That's a double speak. Okay, Sharad Kohli has a point to make. Yes, go ahead.
Very interesting point here. Well, India was sanctioned with 50% tariffs weeks ago. Why hasn't China been sanctioned as of today? Why has it been kept in abeyance? That's the million-dollar question. Simply because the vital minerals, the rare earth minerals, is something without which America cannot do. My point number one. Point number two, is America not importing? Has America not been importing anything from Russia all these years? The answer is yes, they have been importing. They have been importing $3 billion worth of goods, which I'm sure the Trump administration should be aware of. When President Trump was asked this weeks ago, he said, I'm sorry, I'm not aware if anything is being imported. Their colleagues in NATO, they have imported far more into this. Why were they accused of murder in Ukraine? They were supporting, on one side, they were supporting arms to Ukraine. On the other side, they were buying oil from Russia. So what is this? Is this hypocrisy? This is hypocrisy at its best, Uday.
Complete hypocrisy, Ambassador Dayal. And that's something that, the United States has been guilty of. Our friend on the discussion, I think, has run off now because he couldn't handle the truth. He said it'll happen eventually. He was not able to give any timeline because the fact is that it may not happen. These are just empty words, and the double speak couldn't be more clear because he couldn't handle the truth, and I think he's left. Yes, Ambassador Dayal.
Well, I'm disappointed that he has left because I was going to say things which related to his comments, particularly about what I had said, and the very strong words that he had used, accusing me of not reading in the papers, etc. The fact is that even if there are voices which have criticized purchases of oil and gas by European countries from Russia, the fact is that on the ground, things have not changed. President Trump and his government have not imposed any tariffs on these European countries for these purchases of oil and gas from Russia, as they have done with India. India was singled out for these tariffs, and as Mr. Kohli pointed out, even China was spared. And although there are indications that President Trump may tighten things vis-a-vis China, because that 6-month grace period is getting over, but we have been treated very badly despite being a close ally. So, as far as I know, there are talks which are going on to sort things out on the trade front, but still there are impediments. But it is unfortunate that Indo-US relations have been plunging, and these latest developments, which relate to Russian oil companies which have been sanctioned, indicate and in fact highlight the fact that they have been selling all over Europe. Nobody said a thing, but India was singled out for harsher treatment. So I hope things can be set right now.
All right. Let's leave it at that. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion. It's time for a very short break. Much more coming up.